Hello, everyone. My name is Raymond Thomas, and I'm the Training and Technical Assistance Manager at NASCAS. Thank you for joining us today for the CSBG ROMA Next Generation Update. Joining us today is Jeannie Chaffin, Director of the Office of Community Services. We have Seth Hassett, who's the Director for the Division of State Assistance at OCS, Jenae Bjelland, Executive Director of NASCAS, and Barbara Mooney, who is the Director for the Association of Nationally Certified ROMA Trainers. We're excited to have you here today, and at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Jeannie Chaffin.
Thank you, Raymond. So we're very excited to be presenting this webinar today with our colleagues from NASCAS. We've asked them to join us because they've been critical partners in our process of getting the annual report ready for review and clearance through the Office of Management and Budget. Our webinar objectives today are to increase understanding of the purpose, the elements, and progress made in refining the draft annual report. And we have a really complete, thorough agenda plan to help everyone out in the CSBG network get oriented and engaged in the process of reviewing the CSBG annual report. We're first off going to talk about ROMA Next Generation and how all of this is building on the ROMA Foundation and the ROMA cycle. We'll next dive deeply into the draft annual report. We'll talk a little bit about what the OMB clearance process looks like. We'll go back and review some of the initial feedback that the CSBG network gave us in April and March when we had an earlier feedback period. We'll look at some clarifications that we think are helpful to the network to make based on that initial feedback, the modifications we've made after hearing from the network, and then we'll also go through the outline of the report and help everybody get oriented to that and talk about next steps. So first off, really looking at ROMA Next Generation, we really are trying with ROMA Next Generation to move ROMA to a new level that propels CSBG forward and really strengthens community action for the next 5 to 10 years. Just as ROMA 1.0 really served community action agencies well for over 20 years, we're looking to build ROMA Next Generation that will help make the network strong moving forward and really allow us to increase impact. We've talked a lot through this whole process about how all of this is really to strengthen services and strategies for low-income people and for communities, and that's very important. What we're looking at achieving with the ROMA Next Generation is to help OCS, states, and community action agencies use performance data to achieve greater stability and economic security for families and communities. At each level of the CSBG network, we're looking to execute the full ROMA cycle and to use data on people, services, and outcomes for decision making. ROMA Next Generation is designed to do a couple of different things, and one is to focus on integrating information. We want to look at the people that we're serving, the services and strategies that are being provided in the CSBG network, and the outcomes that we're achieving, and continually try to learn from that information so that we're improving and driving our organizations at all levels to be better and higher impact. We recognize that this will require attention and capacity of all the state leaders, of local leaders, and of the federal leaders in trying to provide training to our staff, but also capacity across our data systems. So we've got some really ambitious goals, but we think we have a really strong foundation in ROMA to build on. And so with that, I want to hand it over to Barbara to just do a little overview here of the ROMA cycle and how ROMA Next Generation fits into that. Barbara?
Thanks, Jeannie. And we're going to talk just a little bit about the different pieces of the ROMA cycle. We have assessment, planning, implementation, achievement of results, and evaluation, which goes back into assessment to be used again. The implementation of the full ROMA cycle includes identifying what will change based on the locally assessed needs, and it's about how the agency knows if the change has happened. But more than that, it's about knowing what the current status is of implementation throughout the course of the services, about what targets we've set and about whether we're meeting those targets, and about how we can implement the plan in the best possible way. It's all about improvements as well, how we can improve upon our outcomes, how we can actually show some change in the process. So we're going to look at each of the pieces of the ROMA cycle, starting with assessment. In the new ROMA Next Generation thinking, we've got some greater focus in the assessment dimension. We really want to know what the data in the assessment process tells us about our community. We don't want to just gather up some data and put it into a report and say, okay, we've now done our needs assessment and that's the end of it. But we want to be able to say what are the needs in our community and what can we do to reasonably address, either independently or in partnership with other organizations, the needs that we have identified. And part of this assessment process, we want to look at the agency's report data as well, so that we know what the demographic characteristics are of the individuals and families that we've served. What are the partners in the community that are working on initiatives that are anti-poverty related initiatives, and how can we work together at that level? So we're going to be answering the ROMA questions: what services do we give them, who are they, and what happens to the people that we served. But we need to start with a good assessment as our foundation. In the next phase, the planning phase, we're going to use the agency's mission statement, we're going to use the theory of change, and all of the assessment data to really help us as we do our agency's strategic plan and also our community action plan. So the core principles in our theory of change will be guiding practices, as will the network capacity framework. And we'll be thinking in this planning stage about how we're going to strategically respond as an agency to both the individual and family needs and the community needs as well. What do we want to impact, and what are our targets? What do we think is going to change? How can we quantify what we think is going to change? That will be our performance targets. And then we need to be thinking about what services or strategies that we're going to select to actually move us to meet our goals. In the implementation phase, where we're implementing high-quality services with well-trained staff, we want to produce results, but we want to know some things about implementation, and we want to know these things as we're doing our implementation, in the course of implementation. We want to implement a unique combination of services to individuals and families and strategies to communities. And we want to be thinking about the outcomes that we're going to be achieving. And we want to do this during the process of the implementation so that we're observing progress and making changes as needed throughout the implementation process. We don't want to wait till the end to make changes that might impact on our quality of services or strategies as we go forward. In the achievement of results phase, this is where we're reporting on our progress, and when we're gathering the data to make those reports. We want to know what did we observe and measure that are related to both the community and the family level national performance indicators. Remember that our national performance indicators are a standardized set of indicators that show our results across the whole network. How are these results moving us towards our own agency goals in our local theory of change, as well as how are we reporting on those at the national level? And then what was the relationship between the outcomes and the services and the strategies? Is there anything that we need to know about the people that we served that that would be helpful to us as we report out our outcomes in our progress? And finally, as we do our look back across the cycle, and we analyze the data, we compare the actuals with our benchmarks. This is an important time when we're saying what was our performance target in this area and how well did we do? And then did the outcomes that we achieved actually address the needs that we identified in the assessment process? How well did we track our success, and did we meet our progress? And a series of questions to guide some of our thinking: what's changed for the people that we served, what's changed for our community, what outcomes were achieved for which population or which section of the community, and what services and strategies contributed to those outcomes. And finally, what can we improve to better respond to the local needs? And all of this feeds back into the assessment phase as we start again to generate a better response to local needs. So I'll turn this back over to, I think, to Jeannie to talk more about Roma Next Gen.
Thank you, Barbara. So I think you can see from Barbara's overview how Roma Next Generation is built on the strong Roma cycle, Roma platform that we've had really since 1994 when the Government Performance and Results Act was passed. And I think what we're here in a moment, we're going to start really digging in to the CSBG annual report. And I think what you'll see as we dig into that annual report is that we're bringing all the ideas of Roma forward in the annual report. We're bringing the ideas of Roma Next Generation forward. And we're also going to use the annual report as a vehicle to amplify some other pieces of work that OCS has been working on with the network since 2012. Really, in partnership with the CSBG network, we've been implementing two really important performance management pieces, and we call this our performance management framework. And they're made up of the organizational standards for eligible entities, the federal accountability measures for states and OCS, and then Roma Next Generation. So all those pieces are going to be reflected in the annual report that we're going to talk about throughout this webinar. They're very important components of preparing CSBG for the future and really making sure that CSBG is as strong as possible and can really change conditions for families and communities moving forward. So what does this new annual report really look like? You've seen pieces of this in the initial feedback period that NASCAS held previous this year, and you're going to see some new pieces and some greatly revised pieces in this new annual report. So first off, there's the state administration module, and this is module 1, and it is going to connect to the new CSBG model state plan that was implemented for fiscal year 16. So late last summer, August and September, all the states had to respond to the new CSBG model state plan, which included information on how the state would implement organizational standards, how the state would pursue its accountability measures, and all the things that the CSBG Act asks of states were rolled up into that new model state plan. The annual report will come back and look at how the state did on all of those plans and what their work actually looked like. So that state administration module will be in the new CSBG annual report. There's also a section that's very similar to previous annual reports on CSBG expenditures, and there are some new categories in this section that look at agency capacity. They're aligned with the domains that we have in some other areas of the annual report and the CSBG Act. But we're going to continue to ask about CSBG expenditures, how CSBG was utilized, what kind of partnerships it supported, and how does it build agency capacity in the new annual report. Another new module, there are many things that are remaining from the previous report, the Community Services Block Grant Information Survey, or CSBGIS. We've always asked about results around outcomes or NPIs for the community, but in the new annual report, we're looking at creating some space for community action agencies to talk more about community-level work in progress, to look at the opportunities that community action agencies may be engaged in with other partners in the community, and we have a much more robust set of NPIs for community action agencies to use to reflect the community-level change that they may be pursuing at their agency. As I said earlier, we're trying to connect up the people that we serve, the services or strategies that are achieved, and the outcomes that community action agencies may be pursuing. So to do that, we've added a new section in the report on the kinds of services that community action agencies may be pursuing and strategies. And in our language here, services are those kinds of interventions that a community action agency may pursue to help achieve family or individual outcomes, and strategies are interventions at the community level. And we've organized by those services and strategies by domain, which is new. And we have, we think, a pretty comprehensive list of services and strategies that agencies can choose from. We have, for a long time in the CSBG network, collected a pretty robust set of demographic characteristics about the clients that are served by a community action agency. We've kind of revised and looked at those demographics to update those to 21st century needs, added certain categories like veterans and that kind of thing, tried to make sure that we're in line with other federal funders and other sources of collection around demographics. We've added a new report that we hope helps everyone to see what the status of individuals are when they first start seeking services before they're provided services. And we'll talk more about that report as we move forward in the webinar. And then finally, the section on NPIs, on family-level NPIs. Again, we've had a very robust set of family and individual measures for many years. We think we've strengthened the family and individual level NPIs by moving what were really outputs to that service section that I just mentioned. And then we also just are reiterating throughout both the family and the community NPIs that these lists are menus, and that an agency will only report on the NPIs that they're trying to pursue based on their needs assessment, the outcomes that they're trying to achieve, that no agency is expected to report on all the NPIs, whether they're community or family. So that's sort of a high level of what the annual report looks like, and as I said, we're going to dive in much deeper before the webinar's over. But before we do that, we want to talk a little bit about the clearance process for this report, and Seth is going to do that for us.
Okay, thank you. Within the Office of Community Services, we are committed to an open, engaged, and transparent process in the development and implementation of a revised annual report. We're keenly aware of the burden of data collection, analysis, and reporting that it may have on the CSBG network, but we also believe that these tasks are investments that can help agencies improve, grow, and produce results. Your input is critical in this process. Starting in March, we began a three-step process of input and comment on the actual documents that would be used in an annual report. This involved an initial feedback period conducted by NASCAP, a 60-day comment period that began last week and will go until August 15th, and will be followed by a 30-day comment period expected in September. OCS began the process of engagement of CSBG stakeholders well before the comment period, the formal comment period that began last week. Since 2012, when our partners at NASCAP first began the work on ROMA Next Generation, there have been listening sessions held across the country, along with numerous presentations and webinars to engage states and local entities in the development of these materials. OCS also worked with NASCAP and other national partners to convene a work group with representatives from state, local, and national levels. From March 13th to 3rd, 2016 to April of 2016, NASCAP held an initial feedback period. NASCAP invited the CSBG network to provide feedback on the content for modules 2 through 4. NASCAP sought input through an input process in which over half of the CSBG network provided thoughtful survey responses, comments, and letters. We more recently have posted a Federal Register notice that specifically seeks feedback on the following. One, whether the proposed collection of information is necessary for the proper performance of the functions of the agency, including whether information will have practical utility, the accuracy of the agency's estimate of burden, the quality, utility, and clarity of information to be collected, and ways to minimize the burden of collection through information on respondents, including the use of automated collection techniques or other forms of information technology. At the end of the 60-day comment period, OCS will complete a review of all the comments, submit a revised CSBG annual report to the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, and then during a second phase, there will be a 30-day comment period, and OMB will review the comments. Once OMB has determined that it is appropriate, the information collection will be approved for a 3-year period. Concurrently, OCS will be working with technology partners and members of the CSBG network on development of systems to collect the annual report information. The network should maintain existing data collection and reporting processes as we wait for final approval. We encourage states and entities to consider the draft version of the CSBG annual report and to assess collection processes and technology needs for future submissions. Now I will be turning over to Barbara Mooney to provide information on what we learned during that initial feedback period.
Thanks, Seth. We actually had a number of different ways that we got information from the network during that period. The one that I'm going to talk about first is responses to surveys that were done via the SurveyMonkey. process, and there were other comments that were sent to Roma Next Generation 2016 at Gmail, and some responses that were sent directly by letter from some elements of the network. So we had a lot of responses, and you'll see on this slide the numbers of responses that are represented here in the surveys. You'll see we don't have survey 1 listed here because that was on the theory of change, and it's not part of what we're doing right now, but you see the number of responses in surveys 2, 3, 4, and 5 are quite high. I'm going to ask Jenae to speak to the concept of a weighted response that you'll see coming up in the slides. She'll give us a little overview of that.
Thanks, Barbara, and I also want to thank all of you who provided feedback. We had an excellent response rate in the fact that we heard from 50% of the state associations and over 50% of the community action agencies. We had a lot of agencies submit their own surveys, and then we had a good range of states who came together with their state association and their local agencies to submit a survey response on behalf of the state association, and all agencies. We were able to calculate those and weight those responses so that it was calculated to show not just as one response, but if there were one response from a state, one response from association, and if there were 18 agencies in their state, 18 agencies. And then that was calculated into all of the responses. We also reviewed all of the feedback that we received to ensure that there wasn't duplication, and also to ensure that in some of the cases we had the coordinated responses. We would have some local agencies who referenced the fact that they were part of the state coordinated responses. They wanted to provide additional comments on certain segments that they felt a little differently than the whole state did. So we listened to all of you, and that really helped us understand what modifications and clarifications we had to make. Back to you, Barbara.
Thanks, Jenae. That's very helpful for us to get the big picture of how these responses were collected and analyzed. So the first area that we're going to look at is the areas of positive feedback, where we got what we felt was a lot of supportive comments and areas that we thought were useful in a positive way. And they included the local CSBG expenditure reports, the agency capacity report, and the local resources report, and also some of the revised demographics, characteristics of individuals and families served, and the new services and strategies list. There was quite a bit of positive feedback about those, and we're going to look at each of those areas here in terms of their scores. So the first one is the domains for reporting in the CSBG expenditures report. The question was, how well did the domains for reporting allow you to describe your expenditures? And you'll see that the very well and the 5 and the 4 scores are both very high, showing a 77.59% response in the positive on this area. And the next one is about a reaction to the community level strategies list, in which we asked how well the list of strategies described your work, and there were we asked that about each of the domains in which the community level strategies had been identified. And you'll see again high numbers in the 4 and 5, over 50% or close to 50% in the areas on this page, and then there's another page. I'm not going to go over each and every one of these items listed. You'll be able to look at these at your leisure, and if you have questions, you can let us know. So you see here on the second page of the services and strategies list, the community support services, emergency management, and civic engagement and community involvement for goals 2 and 3 were all, again, higher in the 4 than 5 score range. The next one was reactions to the characteristics report. There were some new areas on the characteristics report, and the question was, how well does the report allow you to describe the population that your agency works with? And it was for the 2 kinds of reports, the baseline characteristics and the all characteristics. And again, you see even higher percentages responded on the very well end of the scale. Now, there were some comments about, particularly about the baseline characteristics report that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this presentation. So hold on for that one. They're coming. Then there were some areas that were of concern. These were areas in which we saw less on the 4s and 5s and more than the three areas that raised a red flag for us. And these are the community level efforts, work in progress report, community level indicators, stability indicators, and the baseline characteristics report, which I just mentioned before. So let's look at these in greater detail. The community level efforts in progress report, you see still allowing you to capture the work you do was still in the high 40s, but a much larger number in the 3s in this area than in previous areas. Then on the community level indicators, again, fairly high responses, but the 3s were much stronger here, showing some concern for the usefulness of the report. And then next is these are the rest of those indicators in housing, health and social behavior, and civic engagement. So there are 2 pages of those. Then we had 3 options of the stability indicators, and we asked how well each of those were representing the work that was done in the network. You'll see the first one, that first option, which was that individuals achieved 1 or more of the NPIs, was the most highly regarded of the group, but still some larger numbers in the not well area. Option 2 and 3, very high numbers in the not well. So those are things that we felt we needed to look at more closely. And then on the next page, you'll see the survey results were positive, but there were many comments that came to us that were questions about the baseline characteristics report, and so and there were some concerns that were raised about this report, and so that raised this report also to a level of concern. So what happened was we thought, oh, there were some clarifications that we needed to make before we moved forward, and Jeannie's going to talk about those clarifications now.
Thanks, Barbara. So the first clarification is just reiterating the importance and the value and the requirement for local flexibility. I'll talk about that for a moment. To talk about what we were trying to do with some of the community level work and what kind of space we were trying to create there. We want to clarify a little bit about agency-wide results versus just reporting out the small places that might be completely impacted by CSBG money, and then a little bit about the baseline report a little later. So local flexibility. I think that there was a concern that reflected in many of the comments in the survey results that the report was trying to push folks into particular services or strategies. One of the particular ones that was mentioned was case management. Folks also articulated concerns about being required to pursue community-level change. And we want to really go back and emphasize and clarify that the theory of change, the core principles of community action, which are really built on the CSBG law and the experience and history of community action, really support, in a way that I think is more stronger than ever, local flexibility. So if you look at the theory of change, there's that section on core principles, and local determination, solving local problems is articulated as a core principle of community action. And that isn't just something that people made up when they drew the theory of change. It's really coming from what the CSBG Act says is the purpose of community action. It's coming from the experience and the learning and the history and the values that CSBG represent. So we can, I think, really emphasize that there's nothing in this annual report or ROMA Next Generation that takes away local flexibility. If anything, I think that it's lifted up at a higher level than it's ever been. So as I said, you know, that really is reflected in the CSBG law, but also in the organizational standards. And you might ask, well, how is local flexibility represented in the organizational standards? And I would say that our organizational standards around community needs assessment, around strategic planning, on identifying outcomes, all strengthen this idea of local flexibility. So the concept that's represented in the organizational standards and in the ROMA cycle is that agencies will all pursue their local community needs assessment, and in that process identify the particular problems or opportunities in their community. They will, as they always have done, set goals that are appropriate for their agency and for their community, pick the very best strategies and services that are customized for their area, and then pursue those goals. And that is very important and a critical clarification that we want to make after reviewing the comments that we got earlier, and we want folks to take that understanding in to the next round of review and comment as they look at the annual report. This plays out in a very particular way. Agencies only report on those NPIs that are relevant to achieving the goals and outcomes set by the CAA based on the local needs and conditions. So I really want to emphasize that, that folks need to remember when they're making comments and when they're reviewing that all these other ideas and values and principles that we have are infused throughout this process. So there should be no assumption that any agency is going to have to report on any particular NPI if that isn't an outcome or result they're trying to pursue. So let's look at critical clarification number 2, and this is really related to community level work. There were concerns about some of the aspects, new aspects that we'd added to the report around community, and I will just say that part of what we were trying to do in some of the new additions to the community level module is to create space for agencies to really work on difficult, what I often call wicked complex problems that aren't addressed in a single year, that take multiple years to really move the needle on. And again, the idea of working at the community level is reflected in our theory of change, which is built on the history and the knowledge and experience that we have in CSBG. The idea that to really address poverty, you need to address not only problems at the individual or family level, but also at the community level. It's important to reiterate here that individual agencies are not expected to change, these complex causes alone or overnight. The one I use quite often when I'm giving examples about this is, if we have a problem in our community with low-income kids graduating high school and going on to get post-secondary education or, further job training, that is not something that you can address overnight. It takes multiple years to move the needle on that. It can't be done just by the Community Action Agency. It needs to be done in concert with the Chamber of Commerce and the school and other private sector folks in the community. And our reporting process needs to allow enough space for community action agencies to think that they can pursue these kinds of issues without any detriment. So that's partly what we're trying to do with some of the community level aspects of this report. Again, we think it's really important that community action agencies analyze their needs assessment and look at the conditions in their community and aggressively pursue partnerships that are appropriate for their community based on what the needs in their community might be. So we've got a little reminder here that we hope that the reporting that we have created allows time for community work to happen and really allows for the local CAA to determine what community might be in their area. So this is another thing that we really think is an important clarification, is that in my example, we might not be addressing that problem about low-income kids graduating high school and getting into college in a whole school district. We might decide to work with one particular school to address that very wicked and complex problem. And so the community in that case might just be that one school or the neighborhood that feeds into that school. And so that's a really important clarification as folks are looking at the community NPIs and thinking about what's possible that they keep in mind. Critical clarification number 3. So in the comments and in the survey, we think as we were analyzing the information that the network gave us in that first initial feedback period, that it emerged that there are some really different types of thinking about the purpose, the vision, the values of CSBG. So we thought it might be helpful to just go back here and look at the purpose of the CSBG Act, which is articulated, this is the current act that we're under, as reducing poverty, revitalizing low-income communities, and empowering low-income families. And when an organization receives CSBG, when an eligible entity or community action agency is designated, they become responsible for achieving those particular goals, reduction of poverty, revitalizing low-income communities, and empowering low-income families in a particular geography, the geography that they have been designated. That does not mean that the CA is expected to achieve those goals, reducing poverty, by itself, that the CAA is expected to use that CSBG funding and leverage and maximize other federal, state, and local funding. And I think this is really important to helping to understand that when we are looking at a community action agency and the state reporting out the results that they might be achieving, we're asking for the results for the work across the agency, not just a particular mentoring program that might have been funded by CSBG. But what did the community action agency do? What were the results? What was the impact of community action? And I want to just emphasize in this clarification that this isn't a new concept in any way, shape, or form. This is our long-standing expectation in our CSBG report, in the CSBGIS that's been present for many, many years, that CAs report on the entire work of the Community Action Agency. So keep that in mind, too, as you're looking at the revised annual report forms, that, you know, it is the work of the entire agency, not just one small slice of the Community Action Agency. So what I want to say kind of in closing about these critical clarifications is, and you saw Barbara went over, you know, a lot of the data, the good stuff we heard and some of the concerns we heard, that NASCAS and OCS took the survey results and extensive comments that were submitted to us outside of the surveys, but just letters and emails that we received. We reviewed all of that material extensively. I read all that material. I read the survey results. I read all of the comment letters that we received. And we've made significant modifications and changes to the annual report that you'll see here in a moment when Jenae walks through the actual forms with you. We balanced all that feedback with where we think the community action agencies, the states, and OCS need to be prepared for the future. We didn't make every single change that folks recommended, but we made a lot of changes that we think have strengthened this report significantly. Many of you, if you've heard me speak in the last 6 to 12 months, I've said that the organizational standards are a major success for the community action movement. There's no other movement who's done what we've done to strengthen itself internally. And those are a success because everybody in the network contributed to making those the very best standards we could make them. We're well on our way to having the same kind of results with the ROMA Next Generation and annual report forms. We've had good initial review and good strengthening out of that review. You all will look at these current forms that we posted and give us additional feedback on them. But we want to make sure that you understand that the forms don't look like they looked earlier. They look different. And Jenae's going to walk you through those so that you can really see what they look like today and give us another round of good constructive feedback. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jenae.
Thank you, Jeannie. So as Jeannie discussed, we're going to go through the outline of the CSBG annual report. It has changed greatly. Your voice really counts, which is why we, again, are so appreciative for all of the survey responses, the comments, the letters, the phone calls that we received. It helped us clarify what needed to change, what needed to be modified, and what we needed to strengthen. So we thought that it would be helpful at this point in the webinar to review the annual report components and talk about all of the modules. We have 4 modules for the CSBG draft annual report. The first one is brand new. It's the State Administration module. That's Module 1. Then we have Module 2, Agency Expenditures, Capacity, and Resources. Module 3, the Agency Community Level Information. And Module 4, the Individual and Family Level Information. I do want to note once again that the theory of change is not included in this OMB clearance package, that we're going to continuously update this as a marketing tool for our network, but it's not part of the CSBG annual report. So let's start with Module 1. This is the State Administrative Report. This module has been aligned with the state plan. So in the state plan, there was a lot of questions that asked about the plan performance. And what this CSBG annual report is going to do is it's going to report on the actual performance. It's also going to track information based upon the state accountability measures, the ACSI, org standards, everything that Jeannie had mentioned with the performance management framework. It is set to be implemented for fiscal year 2016, and it's going to include a lot of pre-populated features from OLDC from the state plan. So it has 9 different sections. These sections are very similar to what states have already been collecting in the CSBG-IS. It includes information at the state level, such as what is the CSBG lead agency, all the way down to the local agency information. I want to point out that even though this is a straight administrative module, that this does require information from local agencies. And so there are going to be sections that local agencies are going to need to assist the states in reporting. The next section we have is Module 2, Agency Expenditures, Capacity, and Resources. In this, we have 3 different sections. We have the local CSBG expenditures, the local agency capacity, and local resources administered by the CSBG network. With the modifications that we've made, we received a lot of feedback on the agency expenditures, capacities, and resources report. Some of the feedback that we received is that we wanted to ensure that wherever we had domains, that they were aligned with anything else that we collected domain information on, so the services, the strategies, the national performance indicators. We also wanted to elaborate on what was being collected under agency capacity building. There were some questions about where people would report partnerships, and so we added that section back in. And we added some clarification on when the local agencies would be reporting this information. So in the next slide, we'll actually see an example of the new CSBG expenditures and agency capacity report. You'll see that the first section asks, what is your reporting period? That as a network, we have 3 different state reporting periods, July through June, October through September, and January through December. Once the agency and the state select this, this will be pre-populated through all different reports. And then as I mentioned before, we have changed the domain categories, so these will look differently than what you saw in the initial feedback period. We've changed some of the information to include health, nutrition, and social behavioral development. We added a new section called Services Supporting Multiple Domains. We enhanced what we really was describing about linkages as well as agency capacity. And then we removed administration from the domain table, and we have it as a separate area, which is exactly how it's being collected in the current CSBG-IS form. When we were reviewing the agency capacity information, we had received information about wanting clarification on volunteer hours and ensuring that we were still collecting volunteer hours in the way that we've always collected them per the statute. So the total volunteer hours donated by the agency, as well as volunteer hours donated specifically by individuals with low income. With the staff development and certification attainment, we received a lot of comments that people were really excited that we were asking this information, but we didn't take it far enough, that we weren't including the most recent weatherization categories, such as quality control inspectors, and some of the other energy efficiencies, such as lead risk certified assessors. So we've added those categories. And then the final table that we have for agency capacity is on our partnerships. Now, these are only partnerships that contribute to the agency capacity, and that you would list the total number of partnerships, the unduplicated number of organizations, as defined by categories such as nonprofit, federal government, housing consortiums, and collaborations. Once again, this is aligned with the current way that we're collecting information in the CSBG-IS. Now, as we go on to the next module, Module 3, this is community. This probably has had the most amount of revisions and clarification, that we have significantly streamlined the way that we've asked questions, that we've integrated many of the resources such as strategies, national performance indicators, and that we've even included ways of auto-populating to save time and to make the connections between the forms. We also went a little further with actual indicators that we were collecting. We wanted to ensure that we clarified the indicators, that we added some flexibility around the baseline, and that we reduced duplication across the national performance indicators. So over the next couple of slides, we're going to show you examples of proposals on how the information will be collected in a more streamlined way. So what you'll see on this next page is that we have now called this Section A, Community Level Initiatives. And under the Community Level Initiatives, we have a Community Level Initiatives homepage, Community Level Initiatives status page. We have supplemental data, which are the drop-down lists, which will help be pre-populated. And then we have strategies pop-up windows. Then we have Section B, which is the Community Level National Performance Indicators. We have a landing page, and we have a data entry form. So let's walk you through how you would actually use this information. That we have on the Community Level Initiative status page a way of populating the information so that this would be one place where you would be able to see all of your agency's community level work. that in order to populate this, that you would click to add initiative or update initiative. This would pop up a different window. Under here, if you're adding a brand new initiative, you would be able to select from the categories of, is this an independent initiative? Are you working in partnership with others? Is this part of a collective impact? And if so, are you the community action agency, are you the backbone agency, or a contributing member? This is very similar to what we've asked on our initial feedback period. However, what we realized is that the Excel spreadsheets that we had initially reviewed and sent out to the network were too complex. And so we wanted to ensure that, once again, we simplified and streamlined this whole process. So wherever possible, we've ensured that we could pre-populate it and that we can add text boxes. We've also ensured that as you go through, that if you select collective impact, that you'll see the collective impact information. If you don't select that and you're only doing something as a partnership initiative, you would only see the partnership information. So here's a sample. Under here, you would be able to pre-populate your information on your sample initiative. You'd be able to click to add the year, and we allow for multiple years. This is because, as Jeannie said before, we know that in making an impact in the community and community change can take up to 5 years, 7 years, and that we want to be able to allow you the ability to track those changes over time. We have the auto-populated from the previous screen if you're working independently, partnership, or part of collaboration, and then you'll select what issue or domain that you're working on. So here we have those domains: employment, education, housing, health, civic engagement, and community involvement. Once you select this in here, you'll be able to select the outcomes that you're really tracking, and this will be pre-populated specific to the domain that you selected. This is a way of streamlining it for you to be able to tell your story without having to go through the full list. We wanted to make this easier for you to be able to really capture the work that you're doing. As Jeannie has mentioned, we want you to be able to target your community, that your community could be your whole service area, or it could just be a specific county or school district. You get to set that. That is local flexibility. Baseline is something that you also get to select, that you have the opportunity of saying that the initiative has a numeric baseline, that the initiative has no numeric baseline, and that you'll be able to provide a rationale as to why that is. It might be that this is the very first time that anybody's really tackled this in your community and that you don't have a resource for getting that information for baseline, and that the initiative is working to establish a numeric baseline during this reporting period. We also allow you to select how long you think that this initiative is going to last. Is this something that's going to take 4 to 5 years or 7 years or more? And then when you want to report, we know that sometimes you'll have interim outcomes that you'll be able to report. So if you're reporting in year 2, you might have some outcomes that have occurred. That might not be your end outcome, but you might be working towards adding 200 jobs to your community, and in year 2, you're able to add 50. We still want you to be able to have the capacity of telling that story. As I said, we wanted to streamline and simplify and to really show that you get to choose which strategies you implement. So we've created the strategies checklist for you to be able to quickly and easily see all the different strategies that are listed, to be able to check which ones you're going to be able to track, and knowing that you might be able to have multiple strategies per initiative. For example, if you're working towards really raising low-income jobs in your area, you might have 3 different job fairs to talk about that. The same for the national performance indicators. It can be overwhelming to go through all the reporting forms to look at the national performance indicators, so we wanted to be able to provide a quick and easy checklist. It's a menu, it's an option. You only select the national performance indicators that are relevant to the work that you are doing at your local agency. And then this is an example of a sample data entry form. This is at the local agency information, so you'd be able to select your name. And then as you can see, most of the fields on this form are going to be auto-calculated or pre-populated from the information that you've entered before. That the only actual information that you'd be entering onto this form is what your target is and then what you actually achieved in your results. Next, we go on to Module 4, the individual and family level. In this area, we have 4 different sections. Section A is the characteristics for new individuals and households. Section B is the all characteristics form. Section C is our individual and family NPIs, and in this we've also streamlined to have a landing page and a data entry form. And then Section D is our individual and family services. we did hear from the network. As Barbara mentioned, with the survey results, we actually had, for the actual numeric survey, people were quite favorable about the new individual and household reports. But what people have told us in the comments and in phone calls and letters is that there was concerns over the terminology that we were using, that baseline really led people to think that there was a pre and post situation, and that wasn't the case. So the first thing that we did is we talked about what is the purpose of this report. And really what we wanted to see is that before an individual and family receives any services from community action agencies, what are their specific demographics? So once we identified that, we realized that we needed to remove baseline from the report name and to rename this as new individuals and household reports. So this is brand new individuals and households receiving services. Then we also looked at the demographics that we were collecting. With the all demographics, we have a lot of different demographics, and some of them don't change. But in some cases, they would change. And that's actually how we started to recognize that we might need two different reports. So for this specific report, the new individuals and households, we really focus on what are those key indicators of demographic information around poverty. What's the housing? Are they homeless? Are they in rental housing? What is their income source, their employment? And those are what we're actually asking. So we ask for a limited number of demographics on this report. I can't say this enough. This is the new characteristics report is at the very first time that they engage with the community action agency. It's not the first time this year, that you might have seen them last year. It's whether or not you have ever seen them. And this really helps tell a story of, is there a change in your community where all of a sudden you have new individuals and families accessing services that you've never seen before? This has happened in some of our states that have recently had floods where people had never thought that they would need community action agency services, but now that they are displaced from their home, they really did need to see that. And so we want to be able to provide that snapshot of what they look like before they receive services. We know that there is going to need to be some definitions and some ways of thinking about this. We know that as agency-wide data is being collected, that you would need to be able to really talk throughout all the different services and programs that you're operating so that you would know whether or not somebody had received Head Start services versus a LAHEAP service. So we have had those conversations and we started to really look at that, but we need to hear from you about how you see this report working for you and what the benefits are. Some of the feedback that we received from agencies was the fact that, yes, unduplicated count, agency-wide count, has been part of our core CSBGIS data collection since we started collecting the information. And yet we still have areas where we're not able to get a straight agency-wide data collection, unduplicated count. So what we've done is that we've added to both the characteristics for new individuals and households, as well as the all characteristics report, this new area that says estimated total number of new individuals not included in this report. So this is a situation where you might have a Head Start program, where Head Start is able to give you an unduplicated count of individuals and families, but they're not able to give you additional information such as what their demographics are, nor are you able to see if they're the same individuals and families that you're able to report in the demographics report here. This allows us to be able to see how widespread of an issue this is. So we ask you to give us a range of 0 to 200, all the way up to 600 plus individuals and families. And then there's also going to be a pop-up box that allows you to know which programs are listed here. Is this Head Start? Is this WIOA? Is this LAHEAP? Is this other? This shows the additional demographics that we're collecting. As I said, we really focused in on things that were really important to know before anybody receives services. So we have education level. We have whether they have health insurance. We have the level of household income as well as the source of household income. Similar to what we did with the community level indicators, strategies, we wanted to make it easier for you to plan as part of that ROMA cycle what services and what national performance indicators you would really be tracking. So for individuals and families, we've also allowed you to have a checklist of all the national performance indicators that your community action agency would be reporting. This really helps you strategize how to make those connections between the reporting, between the services, and between the people. We also streamlined how we would do the data collection, and we've made it very similar to what the current CSBGIS data collection is. that we ask for the number of participants served in programs. We ask for the target, and as part of that ROMA cycle, this is what you would be planning to really affect, and then what you actually achieve. And then we have the auto calculation of the percentage achieving outcomes in the reporting period, as well as the planning accuracy, which is part of our GEPRA measures, which is how well you plan versus your target versus the actual achievement of what happened. The stability measures, during our initial feedback period, we had 3 different stability measures. 2 actually survived until this round. So we have the number of individuals who achieve 1 or more outcomes as identified by the National Performance Indicators in various domains. We do want to note that this would require an agency to be able to have an unduplicated number of individuals who achieved 1 or more reporting of outcomes during the year, and that this would be an aggregated information. The next that we had is the number of individuals engaged with community action who reported improved financial well-being. This would require agencies to keep, again, an unduplicated number of counts of people who reported improved financial well-being, and it really relates to the CSBG financial well-being scale. And we have this hyperlink for you to really go into see what that scale of that survey is. So that is a very quick overview of the CSBG annual report. I wanted to talk about proposed reporting timelines for states and agencies. For each of the modules, we really did a post-analysis on what it was going to take once this is cleared through OMB to implement into a report. That for Module 1, the State Administration module, that we project that states would be able to report for fiscal year 2016, March 31st, 2017. And the reasoning for this is because it's already connected to the information that you currently collect in your state plan, as well as what's currently collected in the CSBG IS sections for the state. Then when we look at what's going to be collected at the local agency level for the agency expenditures, resources, community information, individual and family, we know that this is going to take a lot of training and technical assistance. It's going to require for you to update your data collection systems and then to actually have time to collect information on your communities and your individuals and families. So we project that the first time that you would report on these modules 2, 3, and 4 would be March 31st, 2019. So that would be for the fiscal year 2018 reporting cycle. We have upcoming webinars that are going to review all of this information. These are going to be interactive webinars for you to be able to ask us questions and to be able to have time to actually look through the packet. So our first webinar is going to be on June 29th. This is going to be 2 to 3 p.m. I want to reference that all of these times are Eastern Standard Time, and that this is going to be covering Module 3, the community level information. Our next webinar that we're going to have, that's an interactive webinar, is July 6th. Once again, 2 to 3:30 Eastern. This is Module 4, the individual and family level information. And then our final webinar that we're going to have is July 14th, and this will cover Module 1 and 2. This is for the State Administration module, as well as the Agency Expenditures, Capacity, and Resources. I do want to note that because the State Administration module is brand new, we're also going to have an additional recorded webinar that you'll be able to access on the NASCAS website that walks you through the State Administration module so that you'll be better prepared for when we have the interactive webinar. At this point, I'm going to turn it to Seth to talk about how you can find information on the Dear Colleague and all the other resources.
Okay, thank you, Jenae. So as I mentioned earlier, on June 16th, we posted a Federal Register notice outlining beginning the formal 60-day comment period. And the next day, on June 17th, OCS published guidance, including a link to the Federal Register notice and instructions on how to provide comments. So this provides, on this slide, you can see an image of the Dear Colleague message that went out. At the very top of the slide, you can see the web address. So also you can also find the web address by just going to the OCS homepage and following links through. It's featured at the front of that web page. And next slide, you can just sort of see there are these are some of the various documents that are included with that Dear Colleague message. Includes the actual information packet that with all the different modules, and again, there are supporting documents and materials on the NASCAP website, but this is the sort of the official packet that we are putting out, background information, theory of change, and a very short summary of the key modifications that have been made. I would just encourage everyone who's listening to this webinar to read through that Dear Colleague message. It has a lot of information, a lot of critical information, and to stay posted as we will post additional information as it becomes available on our website.
NASCAS will also have a lot of resources for you to support your review. That we will have the initial feedback period, all the resources that were part of that, they'll be archived, and that when you go to our webpage, you'll see all the information that we're going to provide to you. This is not part of what's going to go through the OMB clearance package, but really this is to help facilitate your review. So some of the documents that we're going to have posted on our NASCAS website are, we have Excel spreadsheets for the local agency modules. This will allow you to really see how interactive they are to test them out. We'll also show you what the state and national reports are. We have decided that the collective impact tool that was initially part of the initial feedback period is still a really good local tool, and that's what we heard from a lot of the comments that we received. So that's something that's still on our website for you to be able to utilize. We have our Mythbusters, and this is part of our clarifications, and this will be continuously updated as we receive questions or comments to really help facilitate conversations. We also have some posters that have been developed that will take key components such as the theory of change as well as the community level information and will help visualize how this all is part of the performance management framework. We have a crosswalk between what is currently collected in the CSBG-IS as well as what's being proposed in the CSBG annual report. And then we're going to continuously update all of the tools and resources that we have listed here, as well as post any of the webinars, the recordings, and the webinar schedule. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie to provide a closing.
Raymond, would you mind going back to the OCS slide? That one right there. There you go. So Seth pointed these out to you, and these are the documents that are actually being reviewed, and the document that tells you how to actually make comments is the third document down, the Dear Colleague CSBG Annual Report Federal Register Notice, and it actually has the email address where you would send comments that you want to make about the report packet, which is the fourth item on there. So if you are ready to go and look at the actual annual report, it's that PDF package there on the OCS website that you need to download, and you need to look in the Dear Colleague for where to send your comments. And we do have some suggestions in that Dear Colleague about how you frame your comments, maybe giving us some idea which module and which section you're looking at. So I just wanted to flag that for everyone, and we'll talk about that more on some of the other webinars that are coming up. But then also in closing, I wanted to mention in that Dear Colleague, we really tried to give some background on the bigger thinking for this annual report. I've mentioned several times today that all of this is driven by the CSBG Act. It's driven by our experience. It's driven by the vision and values that have been created, and sort of the principles and just the work that all of the 1,000 community action agencies do and the states, and a desire to really reflect what difference that work is making. And that's a very big question for a block grant to try to answer, but we really try to, with the advice of many good people in the network, to try to think about how do we answer that question internally. What do agencies need to know and understand so that they can be better? And then how do we answer that question about what difference are we making externally to a variety of stakeholders, whether those be your local community action, community members, or representatives at the state level, folks here nationally, congressional members at all of those levels, along with elected officials. We have a desire today, I think, to be able to have data to use to improve internally and also to use externally so folks understand what we're doing. If this was an easy question to answer, what difference do we make? You know, we would have a very simplified way of collecting information, but we all know in this work that that's a very complex question to answer. And when you're doing anti-poverty work, you need to have an understanding of who you're serving, what you're doing with those folks and with the community, and what outcomes you're achieving. So our annual report seeks to do all of that and make sure that we're following the law and good management principles. So please look back at the Dear Colleague to have further understanding of where this is all coming from. Finally, I just want to thank NASCAS, all the NASCAS staff, for helping us develop the materials that you've seen today. I also want to thank the other national partners, Community Action Partnership, National Community Action Foundation, CAPLAW, for serving on various work groups and giving us feedback and being very, very engaged in this process. We've heard from all the national partners and tried to be very attentive to what they have told us. And then as Jenae is so kindly done, I just want to thank everybody out in the states, all the state CSBG lead offices, all the folks in the community action agencies. Your time, you're attacking very complex problems. You are trying to do too much with too few resources. And so when we pull you away to look and comment about this stuff, I know it's challenging for you. It's very important, so I appreciate the time that you all give to this, because I know that the work you're doing to address critical needs for families and individuals and communities is really important too. And I just really want everybody to know we appreciate all of your effort on this. It is important because it will be better if all of you look at this and give us your comments. We'll have something that we can all be very proud of, and we can put out to show that, you know, we're very engaged with being better and very engaged in accountability as we move forward. So with that, we'll close this webinar. If you have comments or questions about any of the materials, please feel free to reach out to OCS. Also, NASCAS is standing by to answer questions and can help. So please don't be out there struggling with any of this. Let us know what you need, and we'll be as responsive as we can as we move forward with this 60-day public comment period. Thank you.